Some truths are meant to stay buried. A young historian named Elara stands before a forbidden archive, her supervisor's warnings echoing in her mind. She is driven by a cryptic family heirloom, a map etched with strange symbols left by her late grandfather. His theories spoke of hidden societies, secret architects who shaped our world from the shadows. To prove him right, Elara is about to risk everything, her academic career and her very safety, by stepping into the darkness. By the end of this journey, you will uncover the astonishing truth about the hidden forces that built civilization, what ancient secrets are guarded so fiercely, and what happens when someone dares to seek them out. We often search for answers in plain sight, but perhaps the most profound ones are concealed. I would love to know if you are comfortable sharing where you are listening from and what the local time is for you right now. What is one piece of forgotten history you suspect might be waiting to be rediscovered? The symbol was not a simple mark, but a complex cipher. Elara spent a sleepless night referencing her grandfather's notes with ancient architectural manuscripts, the pieces finally clicking into place at dawn. It pointed not to a grand temple or a famous monument, but to a forgotten catacomb buried deep beneath the city's bustling central train station. Slipping past maintenance barriers and into the dust-choked darkness, she found a seam in the stone that should not have been there. A gentle push, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a chamber sealed for centuries. The air inside was still and cool, preserving a treasure far more valuable than gold. Stacked on a central stone table were meticulously drawn blueprints, their vellum crisp and detailed, but the structures they depicted were impossible. They showed domes supported by forces mainstream physics could not explain, and aqueducts designed with a mathematical precision that predated its official discovery by 1,000 years. This was not just an old building plan. It was a glimpse into a lost science. Her triumph was short-lived. Returning to her small apartment that evening, she found a single, typewritten note slipped under her door. It contained no signature, only a stark message. Your curiosity is noted. For your safety and the safety of those you love, consider this path closed. The paper felt cold in her hands. The silent watchers her grandfather had theorized about were real, and they knew who she was. Fear coiled in her stomach, a sensible voice screaming at her to stop, to burn the map and forget everything. But then she pictured her grandfather's face, his lifelong dedication mocked by his peers. To turn back now would be to betray his legacy and bury a truth the world desperately needed to understand. She made her choice, trusting only her most discreet colleague, a brilliant and cautious archivist named Leo. She began covertly digitizing every finding, storing the files in an encrypted journal only they could access. As they pored over the impossible blueprints late one night, Leo pointed out a recurring, subtle pattern in the corner of each sheet, a design that seemed to chart celestial alignments. It was an anomaly that did not match any known navigation system, but its calculations pointed unerringly to a single, desolate location, a remote and windswept island in the North Atlantic. Their path forward into even greater danger was now terrifyingly clear. The cold Atlantic wind tore at their jackets as their small boat scraped against the rocky shore. This was the place the blueprints had pointed to, a barren island of sheer cliffs, and unforgiving terrain. For 2 days, Elara and Leo scaled treacherous rock faces, their fingers raw, guided only by the faintest of weather-worn inscriptions carved into the stone. Each symbol was a puzzle, a test of their understanding of the very geometries they had discovered. Finally, a shift in the rock pattern revealed a hidden seam, a doorway concealed for millennia. With a combined heave, they forced the massive stone slab inward, its groan echoing into a profound darkness. The air that washed over them was not of decay, but of preserved knowledge, dry and ancient. They had found it, the Subterranean Library. Using their headlamps, they illuminated a cavernous hall, its walls lined not with books, but with crystalline tablets that seemed to capture and hold the light. In their awe, Leo's boot dislodged a stone that was perfectly fitted into the floor. A deep grinding sound reverberated through the chamber. From the ceiling, massive stone blocks began to descend, slamming down one after another, sealing the main entrance behind them in a thunderous crash of dust and debris. They were trapped. The air grew thin. Leo's voice was tight with panic, his practicality screaming for a way out, any way out. We are going to die down here for a ghost, for a theory. But Elara's light was fixed on the center of the room, where a single podium held a thick, metallic tome. Her curiosity was a force stronger than the fear. That is not a ghost, Leo. That is the answer. My grandfather was right. We did not come all this way to run. We need that book. Her conviction, a spark in the crushing darkness, won out. Together, they carefully lifted the heavy tome from its resting place. Its pages, made of a strange, durable alloy, were etched with shifting diagrams and a text that seemed to rearrange itself before their eyes. It spoke of foundational laws of reality, principles of construction that could harmonize stone and energy, and then they saw it, a passage that made their blood run cold. It mentioned a continuing covenant, a living council of architects who still met in secret to guide, or perhaps control, the trajectory of human progress. This was no longer about ancient history. It was a conspiracy breathing in the present day. As the final pages were turned, a hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing a narrow, ascending tunnel. They scrambled through it, emerging gasping into the salty air on the other side of the island, near a small, sleepy coastal village. Seeking supplies and information, they approached a local fisherman mending his nets. When Elara cautiously asked if he had ever heard stories of old ruins on the island, the old man nodded slowly. He said, "Aye, strange folk have been asking about those same old stones. Just last week, 2 men in dark coats were here, asking very specific questions. They did not look like historians." The fisherman's words hung in the air, colder than the sea mist. Strangers in dark coats, asking specific questions. Elara and Leo exchanged a single, terrified glance. They were not just chasing a ghost. The ghost was chasing them. The village, a cluster of stone cottages clinging to the cliffs, suddenly felt less like a refuge and more like a cage. They needed answers, but every question they asked only painted a larger target on their backs. An old woman, the village's unofficial keeper of stories, finally agreed to speak with them in the back room of the general store, her voice a low whisper as she sorted dried herbs. She spoke of the stone shaper folk, ancestors who could talk to the rock, and persuade it to form arches and walls that defied storms and time. They built the old seawall and the standing stones on the high moor, she said, her eyes clouding with a strange mix of pride and fear. But her grandson, a young man chopping wood outside, grew increasingly agitated. He told them to leave, that their questions were a poison. He said others had come before, earnest men with maps and theories, and none were ever seen again. The village had learned that silence was its only protection. Elara felt a knot of guilt tighten in her chest. These were not players in her academic quest. They were real people with families, and their lives could be upended by her search for truth. The ethical weight was crushing. Should she drag these innocent people deeper into a shadow war, just to satisfy her own need for answers? Leo argued for a swift, quiet departure, but the old woman had other ideas. She called for her granddaughter, Anya, a young woman with quiet eyes and a knowing stillness. Anya does not speak much, the elder said, but she knows the old paths, the ways that do not appear on any map. She can lead you to the gateway. You must not go alone. Accepting a guide meant accepting responsibility for another life, a burden that made Elara's mission feel terrifyingly real. Yet they had no choice. The men in dark coats were likely already closing in. With a silent nod of agreement, they accepted the offer. Anya joined them without a word, shouldering a small pack and leading them away from the village, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. As they moved into the rugged foothills, the sense of being watched was a physical pressure on the back of their necks. They were now a team, and they were a target. The Hidden Architects were not just a historical society. They were a present, powerful force, and their secrets were guarded with a terrifying efficiency. Anya moved with an uncanny grace over the difficult terrain, finally pausing at the mouth of a narrow mountain pass shrouded in mist. She pointed into the gloom, her voice barely a whisper. The gateway of trials lies ahead. The stone shaper tales say it does not test your strength, but your understanding. Only those who see the world as they did may pass. The mist clung to the stone archway, a gateway that was less a door and more a statement of intent. Its surface was carved with interlocking patterns, a silent testament to a forgotten understanding of balance and form. Anya stepped back, her role as guide complete, leaving Elara and Leo alone before the first trial. A series of massive stone blocks lay scattered in a shallow pool, each one marked with a unique geometric sigil. The path forward was a narrow ledge on the far side, accessible only if the blocks were arranged to form a stable, weight-bearing bridge. Leo, ever the pragmatist, immediately began calculating load distributions and structural integrity, muttering about compressive strength and leverage. He proposed a solution based on conventional engineering, but when he placed the final block, the entire arrangement shuddered and sank into the murky water. A low rumble echoed from the cliffs above, dislodging a shower of pebbles. His confidence visibly cracked. This is insanity. We are guessing at the rules of a game we do not understand. The next trial was a chamber filled with a complex network of crystalline pipes. A single, continuous stream of water flowed in, but it needed to be channeled to 3 separate outlets simultaneously. The puzzle was one of harmonic resonance. Elara, recalling the fluid dynamics in the ancient blueprints, saw it not as a plumbing problem, but as a musical composition. She adjusted the angles of the pipes until the water flowing through them created a single, sustained chord. The moment the harmonic tone resonated through the chamber, a hidden section of the wall slid soundlessly open. Leo stared, his earlier certainty replaced by a dawning awe. You are not just reading their books, you are starting to think like them. The final chamber was the most daunting. A vast circular room held a single, massive sphere of polished black stone, perfectly balanced on a pinpoint. Around it, projected onto the walls by some unseen light source, rotated complex star charts and geometric proofs. The sphere had to be moved to a specific socket in the floor, but touching it directly would upset its delicate equilibrium and trigger a collapse. Elara closed her eyes, blocking out Leo's anxious warnings. She remembered her grandfather's stories, not of force, but of persuasion. She placed her hands not on the sphere itself, but on the air around it, focusing on the vibrational harmony between the stone and the celestial diagrams on the walls. With a gentle, sustained push of intention, the great sphere began to roll, obeying a physics of mind and matter, gliding smoothly into its designated place. A hidden alcove illuminated, revealing not gold or jewels, but a collection of tools whose purposes they could only guess at, alongside a crystalline tablet. Its message was clear. Knowledge is the foundation, but wisdom is the keystone. To build without conscience is to invite annihilation. Elara took the small, metallic key and the new map fragment that lay beside the tablet. Leo's hands were shaking as he examined the strange tools. We just unlocked a door that should have stayed closed. The trials had drained them, leaving them exposed on the mountainside. The new map did not point to another remote wilderness. It depicted the sleek, familiar skyline of a modern metropolis, its glittering towers annotated with subtle, impossible symbols. The architects were not just in the past. They were here now, their influence woven into the very bones of our cities, hiding in the one place no one would ever think to look. Plain sight. The metropolis was a fortress of glass and steel, a place where history was paved over daily. But for Elara, Leo, and Anya, every building now held a potential secret. They moved through the crowds as tourists, their eyes scanning not for landmarks, but for anomalies. It was Anya who first pointed it out, a subtle, almost invisible pattern in the ironwork of a public bridge. It was the same sigil from her grandfather's map. Then Leo found it again, etched into the foundation stone of the central library, disguised as a decorative flourish. The city itself was a living manuscript, its secret language written in plain sight. Their discreet scrutiny, however, did not go unnoticed. A city official began following them, his questions too polite, his interest too keen. From a rooftop cafe, Leo spotted another man in a dark coat, mirroring their movements from a distance. The Watchers were here, and they were multiplying. They were forced to adapt, using cheap disguises and communicating through coded messages on burner phones. The pressure began to fracture their teamwork. Anya insisted on reading the city's energy, feeling for the flow of hidden power in its oldest stone structures. Leo dismissed this as superstition, pushing to hack into the city's planning servers for hard data. Their arguments grew tense in crowded subway cars and quiet parks. "We are being hunted," Leo hissed, "and you want to douse for ghosts." Anya's reply was calm but firm. "Your machines see numbers. They do not feel the lie in the stone. Elara, caught between intuition and evidence, made a dangerous decision. The Central Municipal Archive, a fortress of public records, was their only real lead. She believed it held the original construction permits and blueprints, the unaltered truth behind the city's modern facade. Infiltrating it was a monumental risk, but the answers were inside. That night, under the cover of a simulated power outage Leo engineered, they slipped past a distracted guard and into the archive's cold, silent depths. The air smelled of old paper and dust. They found what they were looking for in a forgotten sub-basement, a vault marked for demolition. The records were staggering. Tucked between mundane files for sewer lines and electrical grids were plans for the city's most iconic structures, each one annotated with the architect's celestial geometry. They had not just influenced the past, they had designed the foundational elements of the modern city, ensuring its growth followed their ancient, harmonious principles. Then Elara found a more recent file, a series of internal memos written in a cryptic code they partially deciphered. The messages spoke of a schism, a fracture within the hidden architects themselves. One faction, the Preservers, believed their role was to guide humanity subtly from the shadows. The other, the Catalysts, advocated for a more direct and forceful intervention to avert a coming global crisis. The society was at war with itself, and their conflict was playing out in the very skyline around them. The discovery changed everything. This was no longer a search for a dusty secret. It was a race to understand a live, fracturing power struggle that could reshape the world. As they exited the archive into the pre-dawn gloom, their hearts still pounding from the breach, Anya froze. She pointed silently across the street. There, on the side of an unmarked delivery truck, idling at a red light, was a freshly painted symbol. It was the same mark of balance they had seen in the final trial chamber. The message was terrifyingly clear. Someone knew exactly where they had been, and someone was waiting to see what they would do next. The symbol on the truck was a deliberate invitation, a challenge left in the open. With their own car parked a safe distance away, the trio followed the vehicle through the city's industrial fringe until it turned into a complex of nondescript warehouses. Under the cover of night, they found a vantage point on a nearby rooftop, looking down into a facility that was anything but ordinary. Through a high, grimy window, they saw a team of workers moving with silent, practiced efficiency. They were not using jackhammers or heavy machinery, but tools that emitted a soft, harmonic hum, reshaping the concrete and steel interior with an impossible quietness. It was like watching a sculpture being formed from the inside out. The tension in the air was palpable even from a distance. A sudden, sharp argument broke out between two of the figures. One, an older man with a rigid posture, gestured angrily toward a set of plans, while a younger woman argued back with equal intensity. Their words were muffled, but the meaning was clear. This was not a unified operation. It was a house divided. Elara's mind raced. This was the fracture they had read about in the archives, made real. To step forward now was to choose a side in a war they barely understood. A direct approach could get them captured or worse, but merely observing felt like a surrender. She turned to Anya, whose quiet demeanor was her greatest asset. You understand their language, the way they think. You can go where Leo and I cannot. I need you to get inside." Anya accepted the risk with a solemn nod, melting into the shadows to approach the warehouse from the street, as if she were a curious local, drawn by the unusual energy. Her infiltration was a masterclass in subtlety. Posing as a seeker of lost knowledge, she was cautiously welcomed by the younger faction, who saw in her a kindred spirit. Over the next few hours, she learned the true name of their enemy, a breakaway group known as the Dismantlers. They believed the Architect's legacy was a cage, a set of outdated rules holding humanity back from a necessary, if chaotic, evolution. They were not just rivals, they were ideological saboteurs, actively working to unravel the hidden foundations of the modern world. Just before dawn, a coded text message vibrated on Elara's burner phone. The words were simple, but their implications were immense. The High Council gathers at first light. The architects themselves are meeting to decide their response. We must be there. The silent war was about to erupt into the open, and they were the only ones who knew it was coming. The first light of dawn painted the botanical gardens in soft pastels, a deceptive tranquility that belied the tension of their secret meeting. Anya was waiting for them by the koi pond, her face pale but resolute. She handed Elara a small, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with meticulous notes. "The council is not a myth," she whispered, her words quick and urgent. "They call themselves the Preservers, and their only goal has been to guide human progress, to prevent us from destroying ourselves with our own advancements. They built the foundations for stability, for clean water and resilient structures, all from the shadows, but the Dismantlers see that guidance as a form of control. They want to tear it all down, to erase every trace of the Preservers' work, and force humanity into a raw, unguided future. They believe only chaos can breed true innovation." The weight of the revelation was immense. This was not a squabble over ancient artifacts. It was a battle for the future of civilization itself. The serenity of the garden was violently shattered. Figures in dark, practical clothing emerged from between the manicured hedges, moving with a coordinated, predatory grace. Dismantler agents. They knew about the meeting. A frantic chase erupted through the winding paths. Elara clutched the journal to her chest as they ducked under weeping willow branches and vaulted over low stone walls. The sound of their pursuers' footsteps was relentless. In the chaos, Leo's satchel was torn from his shoulder, scattering a precious bundle of the original archive photocopies across a bed of vibrant flowers. They were forced to leave them behind, a devastating loss. Trapped against a high stone wall, with only a dense thicket of bamboo at their backs, the decision was upon them. Do we run until we cannot run anymore, or do we make a stand here? Leo's eyes darted, calculating their hopeless position. Then his gaze fixed on a series of brass control valves for the garden's intricate irrigation system. "I have an idea. Cover your ears." He slammed the heel of his hand against the main valve, shearing the old brass fitting. The system erupted. A geyser of water shot into the air, and a network of hidden sprinklers burst to life simultaneously, creating a chaotic, drenching curtain that blinded and disoriented their pursuers. In that moment of manufactured chaos, they scrambled over the wall, dropping into a quiet alley beyond, soaked but alive. They had escaped with the core journal intact, but the cost was clear. The Dismantlers were not just a philosophical opposition. They were a highly organized, aggressive force, and they now knew Elara and her team possessed critical intelligence. The need to reach the true Preserver Council, to warn them of the imminent threat, became a burning urgency. Huddled in a borrowed storage room, their clothes still damp, they pored over Anya's notes. She pointed to a passage that described council gathering places, locations aligned with celestial events. One entry was circled, a reference to an ancient astronomical observatory, a place so historic it was still used by university students. It was not a ruin, it was a living institution, hiding the most powerful secret society in the world in the one place everyone could see. Their path was set. They had to get to the observatory before the Dismantlers sealed it off forever. The road to the observatory was a ribbon of asphalt winding through a silent, sleeping world. Arriving just before dawn, they found the main building dark, its great dome a silhouette against the fading stars. But a single, narrow side door was unlocked, leading them into a cavernous space that smelled of ozone and old wood. They were not alone. 3 figures stood waiting in the gloom, their postures still as statues. They were the Sentinels, and their challenge was not one of force, but of intellect. The debate began immediately, a rapid-fire exchange of theories and historical paradoxes. Leo presented his evidence, the decrypted codes and structural anomalies, with the precision of a prosecutor. Anya spoke of the energetic harmonies she had felt in the city stone, a language the Sentinels seemed to understand. But it was Elara who faced the true test. One Sentinel, a woman with sharp, discerning eyes, fixed her with a piercing gaze. "You seek to expose us, to drag our work into the light. How is that not an act of violence against the very stability we maintain?" Elara's answer came not from notes, but from a place of deep conviction. The greatest violence is a truth kept from those it protects. My grandfather did not die for a secret. He died for the human right to understand the world we have built. Our intention is not to destroy your work, but to protect its purpose from those who would pervert it. Her sincerity, backed by their combined proofs, was the final key. The Sentinels stepped aside, and a hidden panel in the floor slid open, revealing a steep, spiraling staircase leading down into the earth. They were granted a mere 10 minutes with the senior architect, an ancient man named Alistair, whose eyes held the weight of centuries. He confirmed everything. "We are the preservers. Our hand has been light, a nudge in the blueprint, a correction in the foundation, always to steer humanity away from its own self-destruction. We gave you the mathematics for stable bridges, the principles for clean water, all delivered through proxies and seeming discoveries. To reveal us now would shatter that trust, creating panic and chaos." Elara felt a profound conflict tearing at her soul. Here was the validation of her grandfather's life's work, the very reason for her quest. A part of her longed to join this silent order, to continue his legacy from within. But her duty as a historian, her promise to uncover the truth for the world, screamed in opposition. She made her choice. "I will pledge temporary secrecy," she vowed, her voice steady. "But not for your sake, for the sake of the people who would be harmed by the chaos of a truth revealed too soon. In exchange, I need to understand the full scope of the threat." Alistair's expression was grave. "The Dismantlers do not share your caution. They plan to demonstrate the fragility of our guided world in the most public way imaginable. In 3 days, they will sabotage the Global Accord Summit. The main conference center has a structural flaw, a harmonic resonance point we designed to be dormant. They have discovered it. They will use a sonic device to amplify that frequency, causing a catastrophic structural failure during the opening ceremony. It will be seen not as an attack, but as a tragic engineering failure, a symbol of our broken systems. The horror of the plan was breathtaking. It was not just an assassination or a bombing. It was an assassination of hope itself, designed to erode global trust and plunge the world into the very chaos the Dismantlers believed was necessary. The mission was clear, and there was no one else who could undertake it. "We will stop them," Elara said, the words a solemn oath. Alistair nodded, and for the first time, a flicker of hope showed in his aged eyes. "Then you must be prepared. You will need to understand the resonance they intend to use, and you will need the tools to counter it." For the next 48 hours, they were immersed in a crash course of lost science. The architects taught them how to read the subtle stresses in a building, how to listen for the harmonic signature of unstable structures, and how to use small, precisely tuned emitters to cancel out a destructive frequency. They were given tools that looked like antique, surveying equipment, but functioned on principles of vibrational harmony. They were no longer just researchers. They were being forged into agents of preservation, sent into the heart of a global event to avert a disaster only they knew was coming. The hidden training facility was a cavernous space beneath the city, where full-scale mock-ups of building sections stood ready for their lessons. For 48 relentless hours, the team was pushed to its limits. The architects taught them to see a building not as a static object, but as a living system of vibrations. They learned to identify the whisper-thin fractures, the points of harmonic stress, where a single, sustained frequency could turn solid steel into a trembling, fragile web. The countermeasures were a blend of ancient wisdom and modern tech, using small, crystalline emitters to project a canceling resonance, a silent song of stability against the Dismantler's destructive chord. Elara absorbed the principles with an intuitive speed that surprised even her. Her hands learned the subtle calibration of the emitters as if she had done it 100 times before. Her mind grasping the complex vibrational mathematics with a historian's eye for patterns. Her quick adaptation drew nods of quiet respect from their stoic instructors. Leo, however, faced a different struggle. His brilliant, analytical mind understood the theory perfectly, but his body faltered. Scaling the scaffold-like structures to place the emitters left him breathless and clumsy, his hands fumbling with the delicate tools. During a simulation where they had mere seconds to stabilize a collapsing archway, he missed his mark, and the holographic structure flickered and failed around them. In the ensuing silence, his confidence shattered. "I am a liability out here," he confessed, his voice hollow with frustration. "You need a field agent, not an archivist." The pressure of the ticking clock frayed their teamwork. Arguments flared over strategy. Leo advocated for a purely technological approach, a network of emitters placed with calculated precision from the safety of a control van. Anya insisted they needed to be inside the building, feeling the resonance shift with their own senses to make real-time adjustments. The risk allocation was a constant, tense debate. Elara found herself mediating, her own nerves stretched thin, the weight of their impossible task threatening to pull them apart. Finding a moment alone with Leo amid the humming generators and holographic blueprints, Elara spoke with a quiet intensity. You are looking at the wrong metric, Leo. Your value is not in your ability to climb a beam. It is in your mind. You are the only one who can calculate the resonant frequency we need to counter in real time. You are our strategist, our technologist. Without your brain, all the climbing in the world is useless. Her words were a lifeline. The self-doubt in his eyes did not vanish, but it was joined by a flicker of resolve. Their bond, tested by fear, solidified into something stronger and more defined. Elara was the leader, the bridge between worlds. Leo was the technologist, the master of systems. Anya was their scout, their intuitive guide. Their instructors reinforced this new unity with a chilling final briefing. The Global Accord sum, it was not chosen at random. Its soaring, glass and titanium conference center was a global symbol of unity and human potential. Its collapse would be broadcast live to the entire world. It would not be seen as terrorism, but as a catastrophic engineering failure, a profound betrayal of trust in our very ability to build a stable future. The resulting panic and political fallout would shatter international cooperation, triggering waves of conflict and discrediting the Preserver's guiding hand for generations. The Dismantlers were not just attacking a building, they were attacking the idea of progress itself. Armed with their hard-won skills and a renewed sense of purpose, the team departed the hidden facility as the sun rose. Their destination stood against the horizon, a masterpiece of modern architecture, known for its beautiful, impossible curves. They were walking into the heart of a global event, 3 people against a shadow army, with the fate of more than just a building, resting on their ability to sing the right silent song. The polished glass of the Global Accord Center gleamed under the morning sun, a monument to human achievement, hiding a fatal flaw. Blending into the river of delegates and technicians, Elara, Leo, and Anya began their covert inspection. Their trained eyes scanned not for beauty, but for weakness. They found it in the western pillar, a structural beam where the subtle crystalline lattice showed signs of forced retuning. The tampering was invisible to any standard scan, but to them, it was a screaming alarm. It was a classic dismantler method, a brutal override of the building's natural harmonic balance. Their discreet scrutiny, however, drew immediate attention. A pair of Summit security officers approached, their questions sharp and professional. "We are with the Structural Integrity Review Board," Elara stated, her voice steady as she presented the forged credentials the architects had provided. The documents were perfect, but the officers' lingering suspicion was a palpable heat. They were released with a warning to stay in designated areas, a narrow escape that left their hearts pounding. The risk was now untenable. "We cannot do this together," Elara decided, her gaze sweeping over the crowded atrium. "We are too conspicuous. Leo, you need to get to the central utility core and monitor the building's energy grid for any further anomalies. Anya, the support columns and the sub-levels need your sensors. I will take the main conference hall. We trust each other. We do this separately." Anya melted into the background, a shadow among the pipes and conduits of the lower levels. Planting the tiny monitoring devices required agonizing patience, her every sense alert for both the uniformed patrols and the more dangerous, plain-clothed dismantler lookouts she knew were watching. Each successful placement was a silent victory, each close call a reminder that a single misstep would doom them all. The stakes became terrifyingly concrete when Leo, from his hidden position, intercepted a scrambled dismantler communication. The attack was not just imminent, it was scheduled for the summit's climax, the very moment the keynote address would unite the world's leaders on the main stage. Failure was no longer an option. It would be a massacre broadcast to the entire planet, a calculated end to global cooperation. As night fell and the venue quieted, a new alarm flashed on Leo's custom-built sensor array. Anomalous energy readings, sharp and aggressive, were pulsing from the deepest part of the Foundation. The primary sabotage site was not in the elegant superstructure above. It was buried in the dark, silent earth below, and the final confrontation was waiting for them there. The descent into the Foundation was a journey into the city's raw, beating heart. The air grew thick with the smell of damp concrete and ozone, the polished world above replaced by a labyrinth of brutalist pillars and humming electrical conduits. There, nestled within the structural matrix, they found the source of the anomalous readings. The devices were not crude bombs, but elegant, crystalline arrays fused directly into the support columns, designed to shatter the building's harmonic integrity from within. They were looking at a countdown to collapse disguised as architecture itself. Leo's hands flew across his tablet, his voice tight. "We have less than 15 minutes. The resonance cascade is already initializing. The race was a frantic ballet of precision. Anya, with her innate sensitivity to vibrational energy, located the primary harmonic cores. Elara, using the architect's tools, began the delicate process of recalibrating each one, her movements a careful counterpoint to the rising hum of the activated devices. They had disabled the first two when the sharp echo of footsteps on the concrete stairs froze them in place. A dismantler squad, clad in dark tactical gear, fanned out across the chamber, cutting off their only exit. The leader, a woman with severe features and cold, assessing eyes, stepped forward. Her name was Kayla. "You are too late," she stated, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "The fracture has already begun." Elara stood her ground, the calibration tool still glowing in her hand. "This is not guidance, it is murder. You are about to kill thousands to prove a philosophical point. Is that the innovation you want?" Kayla's gaze was unwavering. "Sometimes a forest must burn for new growth to emerge. Humanity has grown complacent, trusting in hidden hands. We are merely returning the reins of destiny, no matter how bloody the transition." Their debate became a weapon, each word a parry and thrust. Elara spoke of her grandfather's faith in human potential, of the quiet work that provided clean water and stable bridges, asking if Kayla truly believed chaos was a better teacher. Kayla argued that every great leap in history was born from the ashes of a broken system, that safety was an illusion that stifled true evolution. While they spoke, Leo and Anya continued their work under the watchful guns of the Dismantler squad, their every movement a calculated risk. Elara made a final, desperate appeal, looking past Kayla to the other operatives. "You joined this cause because you believed in human potential. I am offering you a chance to actually fulfill it. Help us stop this. Help us build something new, not just destroy the old. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the squad. In that moment of fractured attention, Anya located the secondary trigger, a backup system linked to the building's main power grid. The cascade failure was now minutes away. Leo shouted a warning as the primary device they had just disarmed flared back to life, its crystal matrix glowing with violent intensity. Kayla, seeing her control slip, barked in order to fall back, her squad melting into the tunnels as she fled. With only heartbeats remaining, Anya did not hesitate. She slammed her hands against the secondary trigger's housing, not with force, but with a focused surge of counter-harmonic energy drawn from her own emitter. The crystal shattered with a sound like a ringing bell, and the deadly hum in the pillars faded into an abrupt, profound silence. They stood there, gasping in the sudden quiet, the foundation secure. The immediate threat was over, but Kayla's final words, called back from the darkness, hung in the air like a promise. This is not a victory for you, it is only a delay. The war for the future has just begun, and we will be waiting in the shadows you have yet to even see. The silence in the Foundation was a fragile, temporary peace. Their debriefing with the architects was not a celebration, but a stark induction into a new reality. In a secure room beneath the city, they were offered provisional membership, a recognition of their vital role, and a chain of new responsibilities. Their first official mission was clear: track the fleeing Dismantler leader, Kayla, and uncover the location of their central base. But the world above was no longer the same. News channels were buzzing with reports of a miraculous last-minute structural review that had averted a tragedy at the Global Accord Summit. Elara found herself at the center of a quiet storm, fielding calls from journalists and academic institutions. Each interview was a high-wire act, a careful dance of half-truths, where she praised the diligence of unnamed engineers and cited fortunate coincidence, all while carefully steering the narrative away from the whispers of harmonic sabotage and shadow wars. Leo watched these performances with growing unease. The exhilaration of their success was quickly curdling into a deep ethical discomfort. He pulled Elara aside after one particularly evasive press call, his voice low and troubled. We just saved thousands of lives, and we are lying about how we did it. We are becoming part of the secret. Is this really the only way? Is accountability a luxury we cannot afford? His faith in pure, transparent knowledge was cracking under the weight of necessary deception. Elara understood his conflict, but her own perspective had crystallized in the face of imminent collapse. She looked at him, her expression resolute. Some truths are not secrets to be hoarded, Leo. They are responsibilities to be carried. Revealing the architects now would not bring enlightenment. It would bring panic, a complete loss of faith in every system we depend on. My grandfather believed in truth, but he also believed in preserving the foundations that allow truth to matter. I am not hiding history. I am protecting the future it built. Her commitment was absolute, a bridge burned behind her. The new stakes made any other path unthinkable. Intelligence decrypting Kayla's communications revealed the Dismantlers' next, more ambitious goal. They were no longer targeting a single symbol of unity. They were planning to sever the threads of global connection itself, aiming for a catastrophic failure of the world's primary undersea communication network. The economic and social chaos would be immeasurable. plunging nations into isolation and distrust, creating the perfect vacuum for the Dismantlers' philosophy of radical self-reliance to take root. Late one night, cross-referencing this new threat with global news feeds, Leo noticed a pattern. A minor power grid failure in one continent, a strange software glitch in a major shipping port in another, a series of small, seemingly unrelated infrastructure hiccups. They were too random to be coincidental, but not random enough. When he mapped them against the known principles of harmonic destabilization the architects had taught them, the connections snapped into a terrifying clarity. Each event was a test, a trial run for the larger attack. The path to Kayla was not a single thread to follow, but a web of failures she had already woven across the globe. The scattered incidents were not random failures. They formed a constellation of sabotage across the globe, each point a hub of cultural or technological exchange. A digital art museum in Seoul suffered a synchronized data wipe, erasing a decade of collaborative international work. A fusion research facility in Switzerland reported inexplicable harmonic interference in its containment fields, forcing a shutdown. The targets were not chosen for their immediate destruction, but for their symbolic power as bridges between nations and disciplines. The Dismantlers were not just attacking infrastructure. They were waging a war on connection itself, methodically unraveling the threads of a global community to force humanity back into isolated, fearful tribes. The ultimate goal was a regression, a return to a time before shared knowledge and collective progress. Leo's algorithm fed this new data, pinpointed the most vulnerable and impactful target of all. The Transoceanic Data Nexus, a critical landing station for a dozen major undersea communication cables, lay off a remote archipelago. Severing those fiber optic lifelines would not just disrupt the internet. It would trigger a global information blackout, collapsing financial markets, halting international travel, and silencing diplomatic channels in an instant. The chaos would be absolute. The confirmation of the target brought the mission into a terrifying new dimension. This was not a city building or a public summit. It was an aquatic operation, a battle to be fought in the cold, crushing darkness of the deep ocean. When Elara laid out the preliminary plan in their temporary headquarters, Anya's usual stillness broke. A tremor ran through her hands and her breath hitched. She confessed a deep, ancestral fear of the ocean, of the immense, silent pressure, and the vast, unseen depths. "I cannot go down there," she whispered, her voice thick with a shame she fought to control. "My gifts are of the earth and stone. The deep water, it is a void. It swallows everything." Her fear was a tangible force in the room, a potential crack in their carefully forged unity. Elara did not dismiss it or try to rationalize it away. She looked at Anya, then at the complex schematics of the underwater cable station. "We are a team, not a single weapon," Elara stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Your value was never going to be in wearing a diving suit. We need you here, on the surface, more than ever." Elara immediately redesigned the entire operation. Anya's role would be to monitor the complex harmonic frequencies from a support vessel, using her unique sensitivity to guide them through the acoustic chaos of the ocean. She would be their ears, interpreting the data streams in real time and warning them of the Dismantlers' robotic submersibles long before their own sensors could detect them. On shore, she would also be their liaison with a few trusted local contacts, using her empathetic nature to secure safe passage and resources. Leo and Elara would handle the underwater insertion. The stakes escalated with every new piece of intelligence. The Dismantlers' plan involved a small fleet of autonomous robotic submersibles, sleek and silent, programmed not with explosives, but with powerful, precise cutting tools designed to sever the heavily armored cables. A direct assault would be useless. Their only chance was a more subtle form of counter-sabotage, using their own emitters to disrupt the guidance systems of the drones, turning them against each other or leading them harmlessly off course. It was a high-stakes game of subaquatic chess. Their journey took them to a windswept coastal operations base, a cluster of prefabricated buildings perched on a stark cliff overlooking the churning gray sea. For the next 72 hours, they immersed themselves in a brutal training regimen. They learned to operate advanced closed-circuit rebreathers that left no telltale bubble trail, their every breath a recycled whisper. They practiced with underwater navigation grids that projected holographic waypoints onto their mask displays, and they drilled with the modified emitters, now housed in waterproof casings, learning to calibrate them against the distorting effects of water pressure and salinity. On the deck, with the salt spray stinging their faces, Elara and Leo ran through emergency procedures while Anya, her face pale but determined, mastered the complex console that was now her station. The team was being reforged, not broken, by the new challenge, their roles crystallizing under the pressure of the impending dive into the abyss. The descent into the abyss was a slow fade from light into an endless, crushing blue. Elara and Leo plunged downward, their world shrinking to the small circle of light from their headlamps and the constant, recycled hiss of their breathing. The immense pressure was a physical weight, and the cold seeped through their suits despite the insulation. Below, the faint, ghostly outline of the transoceanic data nexus materialized, a sprawling, alien structure crawling with sleek, metallic shapes. The Dismantler submersibles moved with an unnerving, insectile purpose, their cutting tools already glowing with a malevolent light as they began their work on the thick cable bundles. Their plan was one of delicate sabotage, not direct combat. Using their emitters, they began projecting disruptive harmonic frequencies, creating an invisible acoustic shield around the most critical cables. One by one, the robotic subs faltered, their precise programming scrambled, spinning away into the dark or colliding harmlessly with each other. But the Dismantlers had anticipated interference. A powerful, localized current surged around the nexus, a man-made whirlpool designed to dislodge and disorient intruders. The water became a churning maelstrom of sand and debris, reducing visibility to mere feet. Elara fought to maintain her position, her muscles straining against the pull, her focus locked on keeping the protective resonance stable. It was in this chaos that Leo's rebreather console flashed a critical failure warning. A high-pitched alarm shrieked in his ear, and his oxygen mix faltered, the system threatening to flood. He signaled to Elara, his movements suddenly sluggish and panicked. She saw his distress immediately. The choice was instantaneous, a reflex born of forged trust. Abandoning her emitter, she kicked hard against the current, grabbing Leo's arm, and dragging him away from the Nexus toward a sheltered rock overhang. It was a desperate, clumsy retreat, leaving a key cable unprotected. As she worked to manually clear his rebreather valve, a lone submersible seized the opportunity, its laser cutter slicing deep into one of the secondary lines. A shower of sparks erupted in the water, a brief, tragic flare of light before the cable went dark. They had neutralized the main swarm, but they had not stopped all the damage. Sheltered in the lee of the rocks, Leo's system stabilized. He gestured frantically toward the departing sub, but Elara held up a hand, her decision firm. "We are not losing you for one cable. The mission is compromised, but we are not." Her priority was clear. The team, the people she trusted, mattered more than a single perfect victory. It was a leader's choice, and it cemented a loyalty that went deeper than any secret society's oath. As they began their controlled ascent, Leo's sensors, now back online, picked up an anomalous energy signature. It was not coming from the damaged Nexus, but from a nearby geological formation, a seemingly natural trench. He rerouted his scanner, and the data that streamed onto his display made his blood run cold. The trench was not natural at all. It was a fabrication, a camouflaged entrance to a massive, submerged facility, its scale dwarfing the cable station. This was not a hit-and-run operation. It was a forward base. Surfacing into the choppy sea, they were hauled onto the support vessel, exhausted and shivering. Anya's relief at their safe return was overshadowed by the day they brought back. The hidden base changed everything. The Dismantlers were not a scattered network of saboteurs. They were a well-funded, deeply entrenched organization with a long-term strategy and a fortress from which to launch it. The architects, monitoring the situation from afar, understood the implications immediately. Mere hours after their debrief, a new vessel arrived at their remote dock. It was not a standard research submersible. It was a silent, black, deep-sea craft. Its design incorporating the same impossible geometries they had seen in the oldest blueprints. It was a gift and a command. The final confrontation would not be in the shadows of a city or the chaos of a summit. It would be in the lightless, silent pressure of the deepest trench, where the Dismantlers believed they were forever hidden from the world they sought to dismantle. The Black Submarine slid through the water like a shadow, its silent propulsion leaving no wake in the crushing darkness. Elara guided the craft with a delicate touch, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that painted the trench walls in shimmering lines of light. They slipped past patrolling drones, their own vessel's hull resonating with a cloaking frequency that bent sound and light around them. The entrance to the facility was a yawning maw in the rock, a perfect geometric arch that was unmistakably the work of the architects, now perverted into a fortress for their enemies. Inside, the scale was staggering. Vast chambers carved from the seabed rock housed archives that stretched back for centuries. Leo accessed a terminal, his fingers flying across the interface as he pulled up records of the architect's greatest unseen triumphs. They saw the true blueprint for a medieval cathedral that had miraculously survived a great fire, its stone harmonized to resist extreme heat. They found the hidden design for a dam that had never failed, its structure tuned to dissipate the energy of earthquakes. Every pivotal moment of human resilience, it seemed, had a gentle, guiding hand, but the Dismantlers had their own archives, a twisted manifesto justifying their crusade. Their records portrayed these acts of preservation not as salvation, but as a cage. They argued that by preventing disasters, the architects had stifled human ingenuity, that the pain of collapse was a necessary teacher that humanity had been robbed of for generations. Their philosophy was a dark mirror, a belief that progress demanded a river of blood. The confrontation happened in the central control room, a dome of transparent alloy overlooking a terrifying apparatus. Kayla stood before a console, her back to them, as a massive energy weapon hummed with power. Its emitter aimed directly at a major tectonic fault line displayed on a global map. "You see it now, do you not?" she said without turning around. "The truth. We are not destroying civilization. We are returning its growing pains. This weapon will not just cause an earthquake. It will shatter the myth of stability the preservers have spent 1,000 years building. The resulting tsunamis will wipe coastal cities from the map, erasing libraries, museums, and every monument to their guided history. Humanity will be forced to start again, raw and free." Elara understood then that a direct fight was pointless. They could never overpower Kayla and her guards in time to manually shut the weapon down. The only path was a deeper, more dangerous gambit. She signaled to Leo and Anya to create a diversion, then slipped away into the maintenance corridors. Her goal was the weapon's harmonic core, a chamber deep within the machine. Planting explosives there would not just disable it, it would cause an implosion, containing the catastrophic energy within the facility itself. It was a choice of prevention over a battle she could not win, a decision to sacrifice this hidden fortress to save the world above. As she placed the final charge on the glowing, crystalline core, a piercing, automated voice echoed through the entire complex. "Intruder alert. Security breach in the primary weapon array." Red lights began to strobe, and the hum of the weapon shifted into a rising whine. They were out of time. The automated alarm was a death sentence echoing off the metal walls. Elara slammed the final charge into place on the harmonic core, its violent hum vibrating through her bones. Across the facility, Leo's fingers became a blur over the lockdown panel, sweat dripping into his eyes as he fought the Dismantlers' encryption. "We are sealed in," he shouted, his voice cracking. "The main blast doors are engaged." Anya stood firm in a narrow access corridor, her back to her friends. She wielded no weapon, only her own presence, using a small emitter to project a disorienting field of harmonic noise. It would not stop the advancing guards for long, but it bought Leo precious seconds, each one a lifetime. The countdown to tectonic rupture was now under 60 seconds. Elara saw it all in a single, horrifying moment. Leo was pinned, Anya was faltering, and the core's energy was reaching a critical peak. A clean, remote detonation was now impossible. There was only one choice, a terrible gamble with their own lives as the stakes. She made the call. "Now, Leo, override the safety protocols. Detonate the charges on my mark." Her command was absolute. 3, 2, 1. The world dissolved into a deafening roar and a shattering wave of force. The core imploded, its destructive energy turning inward, collapsing the weapon into a tangled wreck of molten crystal and fused metal. But the victory was instantly poisoned. The facility's structural integrity, compromised by the blast, shrieked in protest. A geyser of freezing seawater erupted from a ruptured bulkhead, the ocean claiming its territory with brutal force. They were not just trapped, they were drowning. Through the spraying water and blaring alarms, Leo screamed about an emergency passage, a maintenance shaft designed for just this kind of catastrophic failure. They fought their way toward it, the water already at their waists and rising fast. Anya was the last through the hatch, pulling it shut against the torrent, just as the chamber behind them was completely swallowed. The escape was a blind, claustrophobic climb through darkness, the only sound the relentless pound of the sea against the metal. They burst from a hidden outlet into the silent, crushing blackness of the open trench, their bodies battered and their rebreathers nearly exhausted. For a few terrifying moments, they were adrift in the infinite dark, suspended between the ruined fortress below and the distant surface far above. Then, a shape emerged from the gloom, silent and sleek. The architect's Black Submarine slid alongside them, a rescue that felt more like a retrieval. As they were hauled into the airlock, gasping and shivering, Elara's final sight of the trench was a smaller, faster submersible, a ghostly silhouette disappearing into the deeper darkness. Kayla had escaped. The weapon was destroyed, but the architect of its horror was still out there, her ideology intact, her war against civilization merely entering a new, more desperate phase. The sterile white light of the medical bay was a stark contrast to the crushing blackness of the trench. Architect medics moved with quiet efficiency, tending to their wounds and the lingering effects of oxygen deprivation. In the debriefing that followed, the scope of their victory felt hollow. Yes, they had destroyed the primary weapon and crippled a major dismantler base. But the senior architect's grim expression told them the true story. Kayla had not just escaped. She had taken something with her, a prototype for a portable harmonic destabilizer, small enough to be carried in a single case. This changed everything. A weapon that could collapse a bridge, shatter a dam, or level a building no longer needed a hidden fortress. It could be deployed from a van, a hotel room, anywhere in the world. The threat was now uncontained and utterly unpredictable. Elara felt a cold knot of frustration tighten in her chest. They had risked everything, come so close, only to have the danger mutate into something even more insidious. The mission was a hydra, and they had only cut off one head. Seeing the exhaustion in Leo's eyes and the quiet tremor still in Anya's hands, she knew she had to make a choice. They could walk away now, their debt to her grandfather's legacy paid, and return to the shadows of their old lives. But the thought of Kayla unleashing that portable horror on an unsuspecting city was a weight she could not bear. She gathered her team, her voice low but unwavering. "We are not stopping here. This is not about proving a theory anymore. It is about preventing a catastrophe we helped create. We are the only ones who have faced them and lived. We see this through to the end." Her resolve, forged in the deep ocean pressure, became a new foundation for them all. Leo nodded, his pragmatism now fully aligned with the cause, while Anya's silence was one of steely agreement. They were no longer reluctant participants. They were a dedicated unit, new intelligence, decrypted from the sunken facility's last day. A burst gave them a direction. Kayla was on the move, her trail pointing toward a neutral, sun-scorched nation. Her target was the legendary Library of the Sands, a repository of ancient astronomical texts. The architects believed she was not seeking knowledge, but a specific artifact mentioned in their oldest records, a crystalline frequency amplifier. With that final component, her portable weapon would not just collapse structures, it could theoretically trigger localized seismic events, turning the very ground beneath our feet into a weapon. The hunt was now global, and the final piece of the puzzle lay hidden in the heart of a desert, guarded by centuries of silence. The desert heat was a physical blow, a dry furnace that sucked the moisture from their skin the moment they stepped from the air-conditioned vehicle. The Library of the Sands was not a building, but the mountain itself, its facade carved into the towering cliff face with a precision that defied the harsh, eroding winds. Inside, the air was cool and still, smelling of ancient papyrus and stone dust. The silence was a living thing, a testament to the millennia of knowledge preserved here. They did not have the luxury of awe. Their mission was a race against a clock they could not see, while Anya used her sensitivity to feel for any recent, discordant energy. The psychic scar of Kayla's presence, Elara and Leo began the painstaking work of decoding the star charts and geometric proofs etched into the walls. The language was archaic, a system of celestial navigation intertwined with architectural principles. It was Leo who finally made the connection, cross-referencing a specific planetary alignment from the texts with the library's own internal geometry. His finger traced a line on his tablet, from a carved constellation to a seemingly solid section of the wall. "It is not a wall," he whispered. "It is a door." A hidden chamber slid open, revealing a small alcove illuminated by a soft, internal light. On a pedestal of black basalt rested the component. It was a crystalline orb, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic hum, and within its core, light moved like captured liquid. This was the amplifier's power source. Their triumph lasted less than a heartbeat. A shadow fell across the entrance. Kayla stood there, not with an army, but with a chilling, solitary confidence. She had been waiting for them to do the hard work. "You have my gratitude," she said, her voice calm. Now the artifact, a brutal struggle erupted in the confined space. Leo moved to shield the component, but Kayla was faster, her movements economical and ruthless. She shoved him aside, her focus entirely on the crystal. Anya, trying to create a diversion, threw herself forward, but Kayla anticipated the move, pivoting and striking out with the hardened edge of her hand. The blow caught Anya on the temple, and she crumpled to the stone floor with a sickening thud, unconscious. Elara's world narrowed to a pinpoint of rage and fear. They were now cornered, with an injured teammate and a relentless enemy. Kayla advanced, her hand outstretched for the orb. "Think carefully, historian. You cannot carry her and fight me." Elara's mind, trained in the echoes of great halls and silent chambers, saw a solution not in force, but in the space itself. She remembered the library's perfect acoustics, how every whisper traveled and amplified. She grabbed a loose piece of stone and threw it hard against the far wall of the main hall. The sound echoed, sharp and misleading. Kayla's head instinctively turned toward the noise. Elara did it again and again, creating a cacophony of false footsteps and shifting positions. In that moment of sensory disorientation, Leo snatched the crystalline component from its pedestal. Kayla, realizing the trick, turned back with a snarl of fury, but it was too late. The component was secure in Leo's pack, her cold composure shattered. "You think this is a victory?" she spat, her eyes blazing. "You have the key, but I still hold the door." She revealed a small remote device in her hand. "I have placed charges throughout the support columns. This library, and every scroll, every star map within it, will be dust in 60 seconds. Surrender the component, or be responsible for the greatest loss of knowledge since Alexandria burned." The choice was a vice tightening around Elara's heart. Save the irreplaceable library, or protect the world from a weapon of unimaginable destruction. The timer on Kayla's device began its silent, merciless countdown. The library's ancient silence was broken by the frantic scuff of their footsteps. "We split up," Elara commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. "Leo, get Anya to safety and find those charges." "I will handle Kayla." There was no time for debate. Leo hauled a dazed Anya to her feet, and they vanished into a side passage, their headlamps sweeping across stone shelves laden with irreplaceable scrolls. Elara turned and strode back into the central chamber, her focus narrowed to the woman holding the world's knowledge hostage. Kayla stood poised, the remote detonator glowing in her hand. The countdown was their only soundtrack. "You do not want to do this," Elara said, her voice unnervingly calm. She did not plead or threaten. She spoke to the scholar Kayla must have once been. "This library is not a symbol of control. It is a record of human wonder. You joined the Dismantlers because you believed in potential, in raw, unfiltered genius. Look around you. Is this the legacy you want? To be the one who burned the last copy of a symphony, who erased the star map that guided the first sailors? You are not freeing humanity. You are orphaning it." Kayla's grip on the detonator tightened, but her eyes flickered, betraying a deep internal fracture. For a moment, the ruthless ideologue was gone, and in her place was a historian staring at the precipice of a crime she could never take back. Elara saw the hesitation and made her final, audacious offer. "Your knowledge is not a weapon to be discarded. It is a tool to be redeemed. Come with us. Help us build the new society you claim to want. The architects are not your enemy. They are the very people who can give your skills a purpose beyond destruction. Help us guide, not just dismantle." The detonator clattered to the stone floor. The act was one of profound surrender. Kayla did not speak, but the defiant rage in her posture dissolved into a weary, hollowed-out resignation. In that moment, she was not a leader of a shadow war, but a lost soul who had finally been offered a way home. Simultaneously, Leo and Anya located the final explosive charge, tucked behind a case of astronomical instruments, its timer frozen with only seconds to spare. The library was safe, its wisdom preserved for another millennium. With Kayla in custody, the team returned the crystalline component to the architects, who received it with a solemn gravity. The victory was more than the recovery of an artifact. It was a blueprint for a new beginning. The architects initiated a cautious, unprecedented program of outreach, offering amnesty and a place within their reformed ranks to any dismantler who, like Kayla, had lost their way in the fury of their own philosophy. The schism that had threatened to tear civilization apart was beginning to heal, not with force, but with an offer of redemption. Yet as the first of the former dismantlers were quietly integrated, a new and more subtle challenge emerged, one that would test the very soul of the society they were trying to rebuild. The ceremony was held at dawn in a chamber carved from living rock, where light fell in soft pillars from openings in the ceiling high above. Former Dismantlers stood beside lifelong architects, their differences momentarily erased by the shared vow echoing through the hall. They pledged to guide, not to rule, to build in secret, so that humanity could flourish in the light. When Kayla spoke the ancient words, her voice was steady, her gaze clear, the weight of her past choices transformed into a solemn promise for the future. In that moment, the schism that had threatened to tear everything apart was not just mended, it was reforged into something stronger. Elara, Leo, and Anya were called forward. Their new status as full members was not marked by a medal or a title, but by a simple, unadorned key, a symbol of total trust and access to the Society's deepest archives. For Elara, the honor was bittersweet. Her unique journey, bridging the worlds of history and hidden truth, made her the obvious choice for a new role, the first official liaison between the architects and the outside academic community. It was a position of immense responsibility, and it meant her life would forever be a careful balance between public scholarship and private guardianship. In the quiet days that followed, the team found themselves at a personal crossroads. The relentless pressure of their mission had bonded them, but peace now asked a different, more difficult question. What came next? Leo found his answer in the architect's vast technological repositories. The chance to apply his brilliant, analytical mind to problems that shaped the very foundations of civilization was a calling he could no longer ignore. He decided to stay, his pragmatism now fully dedicated to preserving the unseen structures of the world. For Anya, the choice was guided by a different harmony. The grand, global scale of the architect's work was awe-inspiring, but her soul was rooted in the local, in the specific energy of the stones and stories of her own people. She chose to return to her village, not as the quiet girl she had been, but as its sworn guardian, a keeper of the old ways, now armed with a deeper understanding of their place in a larger, hidden tapestry. The Architect Society emerged from the crisis not merely intact, but revitalized. The influx of former dismantlers brought fresh perspectives and a renewed vigilance, a constant reminder that their mission required not just secrecy, but wisdom. They knew other threats would emerge from within or without, drawn to the power of the knowledge they protected. The work of preservation was never truly finished. Elara's first solo assignment embodied this new era of cautious hope. She was dispatched to oversee the restoration of a historic library in a city scarred by the recent conflicts, a place where the dismantlers had sown chaos. The project was more than reconstruction. It was a symbol, a physical manifestation of the architect's core belief. By carefully guiding the hands of the local engineers and artisans, using subtle principles of harmonic stability to ensure the building would endure for centuries more, she was not hiding the truth, but weaving it back into the world's fabric, ensuring that the light of knowledge would continue to shine, undisturbed, for generations to come. The library's restoration was a symphony of stone and silence. Elara stood on the scaffolding, her hands covered in fine dust, as artisans carefully reset the ancient carvings. Publicly, she was the lead historical consultant, celebrated for her meticulous research. Secretly, she guided the masons to incorporate hidden harmonic resonators within the walls, tuning the entire structure to the natural frequencies of the earth below. The result was not just a repaired building, but a living entity that seemed to breathe with the landscape, its foundations humming with a stability that defied the region's frequent tremors. The project became an unexpected benchmark, winning international awards for its seamless blend of historic integrity and unprecedented resilience. Architects from across the globe visited, puzzled by the building's profound sense of peace and its uncanny ability to regulate its own internal temperature. They left inspired, incorporating the visible principles of harmony with the local environment into their own designs, never guessing at the hidden science woven into the stone. For Elara, every public interview was a high-wire act. She spoke eloquently about traditional techniques and sustainable materials, all while carefully omitting the truth about the resonant crystals set deep within the mortar. The risk of a single worker's casual remark or an engineer's anomalous reading exposing the secret was a constant low hum of anxiety beneath her professional calm. It was a life of compartmentalization where her greatest achievements could never be fully explained. This duality sparked a bold decision. Using her newfound public platform and the project's prize money, she established the Stewardship Foundation. Its mission was to promote ethical, sustainable building practices worldwide, a perfectly transparent vehicle for advancing the architect's core goals. Through the foundation, she could guide developers and governments toward harmonious design, subtly seeding the principles of preservation without ever mentioning the hidden hands that had perfected them. Her work began to ripple outward, inspiring a wave of young engineers and historians who saw in her a new model of responsibility. They spoke not of dominating the landscape, but of listening to it, of building with a conscience. Global attitudes were shifting, one thoughtfully designed school or community center at a time, toward a future where stewardship was the standard. On the day the library was officially reopened, amid cheers and flashing cameras, a secure message flashed on her private device. The architect's seal glowed on the screen. They had located something profound, an untouched archive from a civilization so lost, even their own records held only whispers of its name. The secluded valley was a world forgotten by time, its entrance hidden by a waterfall that roared with the voice of the mountain itself. Elara led her small team through the curtain of mist into a cavern that took their breath away. The archive was not a room of scrolls, but a forest of crystalline pillars, each one pulsing with a soft, internal light. As they approached, the pillars activated, projecting three-dimensional blueprints into the air around them. They were looking at the architect's first gifts to a fledgling humanity. One display showed a simple clay pot designed with a hidden filtration matrix, turning brackish water pure. Another depicted a plow that used harmonic vibrations to till the soil without exhausting it, a design that could revolutionize sustainable agriculture today. The most profound was a blueprint for a community structure, a communal hall that used geothermal energy and natural light in a perfect, closed-loop system, a solution to modern energy poverty that was millennia old. The potential was staggering, a vault of answers to crises we are only now beginning to face. But the archive held a warning, etched beside each miraculous design. It spoke of technologies introduced too quickly, of societies that crumbled under the weight of gifts, They did not understand. A culture given advanced irrigation, without the wisdom of water stewardship, had turned their fertile land to desert. Another, granted architectural secrets, had built towers of oppression instead of halls of community. The knowledge was not neutral. It was a seed that required the right soil to grow. Back at the council chamber, the debate was fierce. Some senior architects argued for absolute secrecy. The risk of these designs being weaponized for corporate greed or geopolitical dominance was too high. They believed humanity had to evolve its own ethical framework first, a process that could take centuries. Elara stood before them, the weight of the valley's wisdom heavy on her shoulders. She did not argue for a full reveal, but for a new kind of guidance. We cannot wait for perfection, she insisted. The crises are here now, but we also cannot simply drop a solutions manual from the sky. We must teach the principles behind the technology. We give a community the blueprint for the water filter, but we also teach them the hydrology and the ethics of shared water sources. We empower them to build it with local materials, to adapt it to their culture. It is not a product we deliver. It is a skill we help them awaken. Her proposal was a phased, educational rollout, a global initiative that would partner with local engineers, farmers, and leaders. It would be slow, messy, and entirely dependent on trust. The council, faced with her unwavering conviction and the stark evidence of past failures, reluctantly agreed. The archive's existence would become the society's most closely guarded secret, its gradual introduction, a test of their own wisdom for generations to come. Elara began drafting the framework for the Stewardship Initiative, her pen moving between the ancient principles of harmony and the urgent needs of the modern world. She was not just unlocking a vault of forgotten science. She was attempting to weave its threads into the fabric of global society, setting the stage for a collaboration that would require patience, humility, and a faith in humanity's ability to learn, one careful, guided step at a time. The stage lights at the Global Sustainability Forum were blinding, but the silence in the vast auditorium was even more intense. Elara stood before the world's leaders, her heart a drum against her ribs. She did not speak of secret societies or crystalline archives. Instead, she presented a set of open-source architectural and agricultural principles, framed as a radical new model for global development. These were the architect's first gifts, stripped of their origins and offered freely. She called it the Global Stewardship Initiative, a framework for building communities in harmony with the earth. The applause that followed was not just polite, it was thunderous, a wave of hope from delegates who had long searched for tangible solutions. Pilot projects launched almost immediately. In a drought-stricken region, farmers used the ancient water filtration designs to create simple, effective systems from local clay, turning bitter wells into sources of life. In a crowded urban sprawl, engineers applied the harmonic principles to retrofit aging buildings, drastically reducing energy consumption and creating spaces that felt inexplicably calm and secure. The benefits were undeniable, measurable, and profoundly human. Yet progress was never a straight line. Powerful agricultural conglomerates pushed back, seeing their monopoly on seeds and fertilizers threatened by open-source, self-sustaining methods. Local politicians in one region accused the initiative of being a new form of cultural imperialism, a foreign design imposed without respect for tradition. Elara faced these challenges not with force, but with a relentless focus on dialogue. She spent weeks in remote villages, listening more than she spoke, learning how to adapt the universal principles to local customs and materials. She built alliances with community elders and young innovators alike, proving through small, successful demonstrations that this knowledge was a tool for empowerment, not control. Her goal was always to build trust, not just buildings. The stakes of this quiet revolution could not be higher. If the initiative succeeded, it could spark a golden age of innovation, a global awakening where human progress and planetary health were no longer at odds. But if it failed, if it was rejected as just another failed utopian dream, the resulting resentment could fuel a violent regression, a turn toward isolation, and the very chaos the Dismantlers had championed. Late one evening, reviewing reports from a dozen different countries, Elara allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of the Forbidden Archive, of the cold Atlantic island, and the deep ocean trench. Her journey had begun as a search for a hidden truth to vindicate her grandfather. Now, she was the one carefully placing pieces of that truth into the world, a guardian ensuring that the hidden foundations of civilization could at last support a brighter future for everyone. The polished granite of her grandfather's headstone was cool beneath her fingertips. Elara stood in the quiet cemetery, the morning sun filtering through the old oak trees. She spoke to him in a low voice, telling him about the restored library, the Stewardship Initiative, and the quiet revolution taking root across the globe. His theories were not just correct, they were the preface to a story far grander and more complex than either of them could have dreamed. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a fulfillment that went deeper than any academic accolade. This was the legacy he had truly left her, not a puzzle to be solved, but a responsibility to be carried. The path had demanded so much. She had traded a public life of scholarly recognition for one of deliberate silence. She had endured the terror of the deep ocean and the constant fear of being watched. She had risked her life and the lives of her closest friends. Were the sacrifices justified? She looked inward at the memory of the farmers with clean water and the communities living in newly resilient homes. The answer was not a shouted yes, but a quiet, unshakable certainty that vibrated in her bones. The positive change blooming in the world was the only validation she would ever need. Her commitment was no longer a choice, but the core of who she had become. She was the bridge, the interpreter between a hidden past and a hopeful future. Her resolve crystallized into a new, more ambitious vision, a world where the architect's knowledge would not just be a guarded secret, but a shared inheritance, introduced with wisdom and ethical care for the benefit of all. As she turned to leave, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it a sense of closure and a beginning. Back in her office, surrounded by blueprints and reports, a new message awaited. It was a formal request from a consortium of universities. A select group of their most promising graduates, inspired by her public work, were petitioning for a special seminar on the philosophical roots of sustainable design. They were young, brilliant, and hungry for a deeper truth. The invitation was not just to teach, but to mentor the next generation of guardians. The silent work of preservation was ready to welcome new voices. The seminar room hummed with a different kind of energy. Elara looked out at the faces of her select students, each one a brilliant spark of curiosity. They were architects, historians, and engineers, united by a shared suspicion that the world was built on deeper foundations than their textbooks acknowledged. She began not with secrets, but with patterns. She taught them to see the recurring mathematical harmonies in structures that had survived centuries of earthquakes, and to question why certain ancient agricultural techniques produced yields modern science still struggled to explain. Their assignments were not essays, but community projects. One team, led by a quiet engineering student named Semir, used principles of passive solar alignment and natural airflow to redesign a community center in a dense urban neighborhood, slashing its energy costs and creating a space that felt inherently peaceful. Another group, guided by a history major named Lena, helped a coastal town revive an old seawall design, its curved stones dissipating wave energy with an efficiency that baffled contemporary engineers. These were not grand revelations of hidden knowledge, but practical applications of a forgotten logic, and they worked. The success of these projects fostered a dangerous curiosity. Lena, in particular, began connecting dots Elara had carefully left unconnected, her research leading her to obscure trade routes and anomalous weather patterns that seemed to guide the placement of ancient cities. Elara watched her with a knot of pride and fear tightening in her chest. To give these students the full truth would be to hand them a weapon and a target simultaneously. She remembered the typewritten note under her door, the feeling of the cold Atlantic wind, the crushing pressure of the deep. How could she lead them into that darkness? Her solution was a curriculum of graduated trust. The initial lessons were about observable patterns and ethical application. Deeper principles, the ones touching on harmonic science and the architect's true history, were only introduced after a student had demonstrated not just intellectual brilliance, but a profound sense of responsibility. It was a test of character as much as intellect. The potential she saw in them was the society's greatest hope for evolution. They approached the old knowledge with fresh perspectives, unburdened by the centuries of dogma that had sometimes constrained the architects themselves. They were learning to be stewards, not just guardians. One evening, Lena stayed late, her laptop screen filled with overlapping maps and star charts. She had been cross-referencing lunar cycles with regional folklore about guiding stones. Elara, her instincts humming, walked over. Lena looked up, her eyes alight with a familiar, terrifying excitement. "I think I found something the records do not mention," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The tales say the Stone Shaper folk marked their most important sites, not with a single symbol, but with a constellation of 3, visible only during a specific celestial event. According to my calculations, that alignment happens next month, and it points to a valley everyone thinks is just a myth. The story of the hidden builders was not a closed book. A new chapter, written by the next generation, was waiting to be discovered. The valley's entrance was a narrow crack in the mountain, almost invisible behind a curtain of thorny vines. Inside, the air was cool and carried the scent of old stone and ozone. Elara and her students moved carefully, their headlamps illuminating a vast, subterranean complex. This was no simple ruin. It was an ancient innovation hub, a network of workshops and laboratories frozen in time. On stone benches sat tools of a strange, crystalline alloy, their purposes both alien and intuitively understandable. One device seemed designed to measure the resonant frequency of rock, while another appeared to be a primitive but effective microscope. Lena's constellation had led them to a treasure trove of early scientific advances, a place where the architects had not just preserved knowledge, but actively created it. The records they found were not scrolls, but thin sheets of a metallic polymer etched with shifting diagrams. They detailed experiments in acoustics that explained the perfect acoustics of ancient amphitheaters, and chemical formulas for a self-repairing mortar that had kept certain structures standing for millennia. Each discovery expanded the historical narrative, proving that human achievement was not a slow, linear climb, but a story of peaks and valleys, with moments of brilliance that were later lost and had to be painfully rediscovered. The hub showed a society that understood principles of sustainability and harmony with such depth that it humbled their modern perspective. But this incredible site was also incredibly fragile. A single misstep could dislodge a pile of delicate tools that had been balanced for centuries. The very air they exhaled threatened the preservation of the organic compounds still resting in clay bowls. The tension was constant, a silent prayer with every movement that their quest for understanding would not become the very force that destroyed it. This vulnerability was compounded by an external threat. Their discreet satellite monitoring, set up by Leo, showed unidentified drones circling the valley perimeter. Word had leaked. Looters seeking to sell these unique artifacts on the black market, or exploiters from corporations who sensed a new energy source, were already closing in. The knowledge here was too powerful to be left unguarded. Elara faced a critical decision. The old way, the architect's way, would be to document everything secretly and then seal the entrance forever, hiding the truth once more. But she had promised a new path. She contacted a network of trusted colleagues in global heritage institutions and local authorities, presenting the find as a monumental archaeological discovery. She did not speak of harmonic science or hidden societies, but of a unique and priceless window into humanity's technological past. Within days, she had established a protected research zone with a perimeter guarded by local rangers and access granted only to a vetted, international team of researchers. It was a bold experiment in transparency, an attempt to protect the site by bringing it into the light, but under a shield of regulated, ethical study. The preservation of this valley became a test case with global implications. If they could successfully balance open research with absolute conservation, it would create a blueprint for how to handle the other hidden locations they knew were scattered across the globe. It was a race against time and human greed, a demonstration that the greatest threat to forgotten knowledge was not always those who sought to destroy it, but often those who sought to possess it for themselves. The stakes were the future of history itself. As the team's work progressed, meticulously cataloging each artifact, a new pattern emerged. The architectural style of the oldest chambers was different, more organic, and less refined than the later additions. The tools there were cruder, made of basalt instead of crystal, and the celestial alignments carved into the walls referenced star constellations that would have been visible thousands of years earlier than the main complex. The hub had not been the beginning. It had been built upon the bones of something even older, a civilization that had itself been a student of forgotten masters. The oldest chambers of the Valley Hub whispered a different story, as Elara and her team mapped the crude basalt tools and the archaic star charts. A staggering truth came into focus. The architects, the hidden masters she had devoted her life to understanding, were not the originators. They were inheritors, students of a civilization so ancient its name had been erased by millennia. This was not merely a predecessor, it was a mentor, a society that had perfected a seamless integration with the natural world, whose very cities were grown, not built. The foundational principles Elara had fought to protect were themselves echoes of a far older, far deeper wisdom. This revelation sent shockwaves through the Architects' Council. For some, it was a heresy that shattered their identity. An elder named Valerius argued with cold fury, his voice echoing in the chamber. For centuries, we have defined ourselves as the Guardians, the first and final line between order and chaos. To admit we are merely a link in a chain is to render our entire history, our every sacrifice, meaningless. It undermines our very authority to guide. But others saw a profound liberation in the discovery. A younger architect named Lin, who had joined from the Dismantlers, saw it differently. This is not an end, it is an expansion. If we were taught, then the purpose is not to guard a static truth, but to continue a legacy of learning. It frees us from the dogma that has sometimes blinded us. Our role is not to be the sole architects, but the stewards of an unbroken lineage. The society fractured along this new fault line, a conflict over the soul of their mission. Elara stood before the divided council, not as an outsider, but as a full member whose journey had led them to this precipice. She did not dismiss their fears, but she reframed the opportunity. This is not a demotion, it is an invitation to humility, which is the beginning of all true wisdom. Our purpose is not diminished by a deeper history, it is enriched. We have the chance to become what we always claimed to be, true guides, by embracing the fact that we too are students. We must launch a collaborative research initiative to trace this lineage, not to usurp our role, but to fulfill it completely. Her argument, grounded in her unique perspective as both historian and guardian, carried a weight that pure ideology could not. After a tense, silent vote, the council agreed to support the new research, placing Elara at its head. The stakes of this new chapter were immense. Unlocking the secrets of the older society could yield solutions to global crises we cannot yet conceive of, from energy generation to ecological restoration. But every locked door holds a potential danger. What if their disappearance was not a natural end, but a consequence of a technology or a knowledge too volatile to control? What ethical dilemmas did they face that we are not yet prepared to handle? The research was a gamble, a choice to reach for a brighter future while knowing the box they were opening might contain both salvation and ruin. With the architect's resources now fully behind her, Elara assembled a new, interdisciplinary team, their first mission to decipher the oldest star charts and follow their alignment to the next forgotten classroom. The silent work of preservation was evolving into a quest for origins, and the path forward was written in the light of dead stars. The search for the first teachers became a global symphony of minds. Elara coordinated a clandestine network of geologists, astrophysicists, and anthropologists, their collective gaze sweeping across continents. They used satellite-based harmonic resonance scanners to detect anomalous energy patterns beneath the Earth and cross-reference them with millennia of folklore and star lore. The early findings were not merely data points. They were a philosophy etched into the planet itself. Every site they identified, from a submerged structure in the Pacific to a geometric pattern in a remote desert, shared a common theme, a profound emphasis on universal harmony. These were not hidden fortresses, but classrooms, left behind with clues intended for a future generation, advanced enough to find them. The sheer scale of this operation strained the architect's resources to their absolute limit. Maintaining secrecy while moving such vast amounts of personnel and advanced technology was a logistical nightmare, a constant dance on the edge of exposure. The old guard, like Valerius, watched with mounting anxiety, convinced that every new satellite image shared was a step toward their own oblivion. Elara saw the fragility of their position, a secret society stretched too thin across the globe. She knew they could not hold this truth alone forever. In a decisive move that sent shockwaves through the council, she proposed a radical solution: the creation of a public-facing institute dedicated to the holistic study of human heritage. It would be a place where these discoveries could be introduced gradually, framed as archaeological breakthroughs and philosophical insights, slowly preparing the global consciousness for the deeper truths to come. The Institute would not reveal the architects, but their foundational principles, a first careful step out of the shadows. This public beacon, however, would also be a massive target. Corporations fearing the disruption of their energy monopolies, governments wary of any shift in the global balance of power, and remnants of the Dismantlers who saw any guided progress as a betrayal. All would view it with suspicion or outright hostility. Its success would depend on a stewardship as careful and harmonious as the ancient principles it sought to study. As the architectural plans for the Institute for Planetary Heritage were finalized, Elara stood before the construction site, the scent of turned earth filling the air. She looked out at a world still unaware of the profound reconnection, awaiting it, a world on the cusp of remembering its oldest, most essential lessons, and she felt the immense weight and privilege of being its guide. The polished marble of the Institute's main hall seemed to absorb the light from 1,000 cameras. Elara stood at the podium, the gaze of global leaders and the watching world a physical pressure. She did not speak of crystalline archives or secret wars beneath the ocean. Instead, she wove a new story for humanity, one built on the patterns she had spent her life deciphering. We stand at a crossroads not of our own making, but of our own remembering. For too long, we have believed progress is a force we must chase, a chaotic sprint into the unknown. But what if it is a path we are meant to walk, with intention and with care? She spoke of the restored library, not as a miracle, but as an example of listening to the wisdom inherent in stone and place. She described the farming communities thriving with ancient water techniques, not as recipients of charity, but as partners in reclaiming a lost birthright. Her own journey from a solitary historian to the leader of a global initiative became her most powerful evidence. I sought to prove my grandfather right, to uncover a conspiracy. Instead, I found a covenant, a silent promise between generations to be good stewards. The hidden architects I chased were not puppeteers. They were gardeners, tending the soil so that we might learn to grow. The principles she unveiled were simple yet profound, a call for design that harmonized with the earth, for technology that served community, for progress measured not in speed but in stability. She presented them not as a rigid doctrine, but as a universal language waiting to be spoken again. Then came the moment that would be replayed across the globe. One by one, leaders from nations once divided by resource wars and ideological chasms stood. A representative from a drought-ravaged nation, then from an industrial powerhouse, then from a small island nation threatened by rising seas. Together, they recited a pledge, their voices merging into a single vow to integrate these principles of stewardship into their national policies. It was not a legally binding treaty, but something far more powerful, a shared moral compass. In that hall, the weight of secrecy Elara had carried for so long began to dissolve, not into nothingness, but into a collective responsibility. The silent work of centuries was now a chorus. She looked out, not at a crowd, but at the first wave of a new kind of architect, one that would build in the light. Her growth was complete. The seeker had become the source. The turning point was not marked by the unveiling of a single truth, but by the quiet agreement of millions to start building a world worthy of its hidden foundations. A new era of collective purpose began to reshape the world, its foundations built on the principles Elara had helped reintroduce. The initiatives she championed sparked unprecedented collaboration, where engineers worked alongside ecologists and urban planners sought the counsel of historians. It was no longer about isolated progress, but about weaving a resilient tapestry of human ingenuity, thread by careful thread. Elara watched this unfold from her office at the Institute for Planetary Heritage, a quiet hum of satisfaction replacing the frantic pulse of her earlier quests. She had journeyed from a solitary academic chasing ghosts to becoming a living bridge, connecting the profound truths of the past with the boundless potential of the future. In that role, she found a profound and lasting peace. The architect's legacy was no longer a secret to be guarded, but a living, breathing force, its wisdom nurturing communities and inspiring a new generation of stewards. Of course, challenges persisted. Old systems resisted change, and new ethical dilemmas emerged with every discovery. Yet the foundational understanding of our world was now stronger, rooted in harmony rather than dominance. Elara's greatest joy came from her work with the students, the bright-eyed seekers who saw the world not as a fixed map, but as a manuscript filled with hidden text. She looked forward to mentoring them, to passing on not just knowledge, but the responsibility to question, to listen, and to build with conscience. The story of our civilization does not have an ending. It is a continuous, unfolding quest. For every answer revealed, a new mystery waits just beyond the horizon, a promise that the journey to understand the hidden architects of our world and the hidden potential within ourselves is a story without end.